Hey, it's Russell Graves here at the barn at Hackberry Farm in Dodge City, Texas, and today we're bringing you another episode of What Makes This Picture Memorable. You know, last time I brought you a picture I took when I was 25. This time I'm going to go back even one step further. I took this picture when I was 23. And of all the pictures I'll show you in this series, the one I'm going to show you today is the one that really I felt like when I took it, I kind of knew what I was doing at that point, because before then, whenever I'd take pictures, it was random. Sometimes I'd take good pictures, sometimes I would take a good picture, sometimes I wouldn't, but I never really did understand why one picture turned out good and one picture didn't. Well, the day I shot this picture, there was a little bit of pre-planning to it, there was a little bit of luck to it, but for the most part, I just knew what to do the minute the subject arrived, and it was time to take a nice shot. So, stay with me. Let's take a look at what makes this picture memorable. Hey, if you like these videos, be sure to like and subscribe below. It helps me out a lot. It helps me bring you guys a lot of great content. Okay, so here we go. This is it, the Coyote shot. And you can tell if you look at this picture today, it's not as crisp. The colors are off a little bit from what you would expect out of a modern digital camera, but this is a scan of a piece of film. I shot this picture on Kodachrome 64 film way back in the day, 1993, 31 years ago as I shoot this video today, and it seems just like yesterday. But I've written about this Coyote before, and I've written about this in the context that it draws my memory back to a time when, like everyone else, you struggle with the nuts and bolts in learning photography, and this is the day when I felt like everything made sense to me. Now, one thing you got to remember is being shot on film, you didn't have the instant feedback like you have today. In fact, living in a rural area like I've always lived in, I'd have to send the film off, and it'd take a couple of weeks before I got it back. And when I shot this picture, I remember like it was yesterday, I was looking through the box of slide film that I got back from the processor, and I was going through it, and when I saw this picture, my first thought was they gave me someone else's picture, because it was so good in my mind that I thought they accidentally slipped a better photographer's image into my box. But as I looked at the pictures before and after, I remembered that's the Coyote I shot a picture of. And so, again, this is the time when all the work I'd done, all the preparation I'd done, all the lessons I'd learned had finally started kind of coming home and making sense to me. And so the story behind this picture is pretty simple. At the time, I was teaching high school out in the Texas Panhandle. I'd come back home on Christmas break with me and my wife, as before I had kids, and we were visiting family, and so I took my camera and went down to the woods that I spent so much time in as a boy. And as I was walking around, I found a game trail, and I decided I was wearing camouflage, and I decided to set up in some brush and kind of face towards the northeast a little bit with the sun at my back, and hopefully something came down the game trail and stood there long enough for me to get a picture of. And at first I was expecting a deer or something like that to come by. I didn't know what was going to come by, but after about 10 or 15 minutes of sitting there, I saw some movement coming through the grass, and I realized what it was, and I was ready. Now, when we take a look at a picture like this, and this is true with any scene, one of the things that kind of messes with the camera's meters, and this was true back in 1993, it's even true today, is that when you have a scene with some dark foliage like this in the background, and then you have some lighter foliage, this is more sort of mid-tone. This is a midway point on your histogram between total black and total white. When you have these two things combined in the scene, sometimes the camera doesn't know how to handle it. But this is where I had the wherewithal to understand what was happening there in terms of the lighting on this scene, and to be able to set my camera in a way that I could take advantage of that and be able to get a good exposure when the time came. So the camera I used for this image was, as I recall, a Minolta X700 camera, because that's just what I would have used at that time. Maybe it might have been a Maxim 9000 if I would have had one of those by then, but they were pretty basic cameras compared to all the technology we have today. And I shot this was right after I bought my very first really good lens. It was a Tokina 300mm f2.8 lens, and so I shot this with a 300mm lens. That ought to explain how close I was to this Coyote. And so when I sat down and was really analyzing the scene, I realized these dark trees are going to make the camera overexposed a little bit. So I did what I learned to do at that time, is I pointed the camera at the northern blue sky. And the northern blue sky, if you don't know, it's a roughly 18% gray. And so I dialed all of my controls manually at the northern blue sky. And at the time I was shooting manually because you had a chance to shoot aperture priority on these cameras, but I think that was maybe the only option. There weren't a whole lot of options on program modes like you had today. So early on I learned how to shoot manually, and that's why I shot this. So I had the shutter speed dialed in, I had the aperture dialed in, the ISO with film you couldn't change. It was shot at Kodachrome 64, which is 64 ISO. And so I had everything set in, ready to roll, and then it was just a matter of waiting. And I didn't have to wait that long at all. Within a few minutes as I was sitting there, I looked to my left, and here comes a coyote with his head down, just creeping through the grass, kind of zigzagging. And I thought if he gets a few more feet, he'll be right here in front of me. He doesn't know I'm here, and so I'll be able to shoot a picture of him. And one of the things you learn about animals when you grow up around them, when you grow up around wildlife like I did, is you figure out ways to make animals like this stop, whether it's a deer or a coyote or a bobcat or whatever. And and the reason you make them stop just to take a better look at them. And so as that coyote was coming through the brush, when he got right in front of me like this, I just made a squeak at him like you'd call a dog. And when I did, he looked up straight at me like that, and I was ready. Now, here's the thing you got to remember too, and I don't say this, I say it as a matter of fact, not for any kind of self-aggrandizement, but that camera I used back in the day, even though it was autofocus, if it was the Maxim 9000, if I'm remembering that right, even though it was autofocus, it focused so slow I never used the autofocus on it. So whether it was the Maxim 9000 or the X700, the Minolta X700, either way they were both manual focus cameras. And so when the coyote walked in the frame, I had to manually focus quick. I was shooting a motor drive that shot 3 or 4 or 5 frames a second, depending on the camera I was using. Shot a few frames, and then within a second he turned around and ran away once he realized something wasn't right about me. Now, I was wearing camouflage. I was sitting on the ground at eye level with him. There was no brush between us, but even though I was camouflaged, he still knew something wasn't right because I had that glass pointed back at him. And even though I tried my best to blend in, it's just hard to blend in perfectly, especially when you're dealing with coyotes that are used to have really keen vision and are really used to kind of surveying the world around them. Now, from a nuts and bolts standpoint, I nailed the exposure. From a naturalist standpoint, I knew what I had to do to get close to a coyote to get a shot like this. And these are truly wild coyotes. They're not used to seeing people or even being friendly with people. And so he was more surprised to see me than I was to see him, because I saw him coming before he saw me, but I was able to get set up and be ready for him as soon as he looked at me. And then the third thing is, this coyote, when I shot this picture, he was just a beautiful specimen of a coyote. This is a big male. I can tell, a mature male. I can just tell by the shape of his head and the size of his neck and the size of his shoulders. This is a male coyote. He's got it's early winter, late fall, early winter, so his winter pelt's coming in. He's got a really good pelt on him. And really the light, you can see it's kind of coming from the west over here. He's side lit because the side of his face there is in the shadow. But the lighting on him, I don't think it could have been any better. And as I zoom in there on his eyes, even though this is a scan, the original picture is really, really, really sharp. I'm going to rescan this picture. I've just bought some new equipment. I'm going to rescan it. But you got the catch light in his eyes. The rule of thirds is great. Eye level, when people teach nature photography, they always teach you to be at eye level with the subject. And so he's at eye level with the subject. And really, looking back, this is the time when I took this picture and I realized I can really do this, and I can do it well, and I can do it at a pretty high level. And so when I look at all those things combined, the technical aspect of it, how I had to work to do it, the fact that I took the picture and didn't really know how good it was and had to wait a couple weeks to get it back, and really once I got it back, I was confused and I thought it was someone else's picture. So for all those reasons, this is what makes this picture memorable. So thanks for joining me here at the barn at Hackberry Farm, Dodge City, Texas. We'll see you next time.